Queen Balqees. Queen Balqees and Prophet Suleiman's story. The whisper of the wind, the kingdom of Sheba, shone like a polished gem under the desert sun. Minarets of white marble pierced the blue sky, and perfumed smoke coiled above busy bazaars, where saffron, lapis lazuli and pomegranate wine were traded like stories. Queen Balqees, adorned in flowing robes, woven with golden threads, and crowned with a circlet of lapis, surveyed her land from a high terrace. Yet her eyes were not on her people this morning. They were fixed on a scroll that had arrived via a humble merchant caravan from the north. The scroll mentioned a man named Suleiman, a king, a prophet, a ruler of humans, jinn, birds, and beasts. Queen Balqees read it 3 times, and still found herself unsettled. Queen Balqees was no stranger to grand claims or religious charlatans. She had encountered countless emissaries and mystics who promised visions, riches, or false revelations. But this was different. The tone of the scroll was not it was solemn, assertive, and oddly serene. It read more like a commandment than a message. The High Council was summoned immediately. In the marble hall of the Golden Court, the most learned minds of Sheba gathered, priests robed in red and gold, astronomers with ink-stained fingers, military strategists with sword hilts protruding from their belts, and scribes who documented every breath of the kingdom's governance. Blasphemous illusions, barked Lord Rashim, a senior priest with a hawk-like nose and a reputation for intolerance. A prophet, murmured the astronomer Hamid, or worse, a sorcerer who commands jinn. The Tales from Damascus say he commands wind and sea, Zara offered quietly. Before her stood an obsidian mirror relic from her grandmother's time, said to reveal inner truths, the balance you have carefully maintained between priesthood and monarchy. Queen Balqees raised her hand. Silence fell like a dropped veil. Merchants from the coast of Tyre confirmed that Suleiman ships traveled with the wind as if guided by command. But it was the account of a desert nomad that struck Queen Balqees most deeply. Wisdom does not tremble before the unknown, she said. Send word to the surrounding kingdoms. I want every account of this. The meeting dissolved into murmurs, but her will was unquestioned. His words did not come on, but creation listened. That night, she sat alone in her private chambers, a circular space framed by hanging silks and open archways that allowed the moonlight to spill across polished stone. But to listen to the silence, to the echoes of her ancestors, to her own heartbeat, she began to notice the rigidness in the rituals, the emptiness behind the chants. How could a god reside in golden flame yet remain indifferent to human hearts? Zara, her closest companion and advisor since girlhood, entered silently. Hamid, the stargazer, was among the few who spoke without fear. He unsettles you, Zara observed, folding her hands before her. It moves in cycles. Suleiman's God, they say, does not. He calls men to a God who speaks without temples, without idols. Queen Balqees replied, her voice low and thoughtful. And that offends you? No, Queen Balqees said after a long pause. It stirs something I don't yet understand. We will answer him not with arms, but with our presence. Zara sat beside her. He threatens the order, or he reveals how hollow that balance has become. The next few days were filled with anxious curiosity. Reports trickled in. Travelers from Judea spoke of a man whose court held beasts and spirits in peace. I saw him, the man said. He spoke to the ants, and they parted. He prayed, and the skies opened. She dismissed the court for Queen Balqees wandered the temple of the sun, walking barefoot on its heated stone floors, not to worship. She began inviting priests and astronomers to private discussions. Gold, myrrh, spices, and silks were packed into ornately carved chests. But along with the treasures, Queen Balqees prepared questions, dozens of them, written by her hand. Queries of theology, science, nature, and morality. The sun gives light, but not purpose, he said, pointing toward the horizon during one such meeting atop the palace observatory. Queen Balqees asked him what he believed. I believe, he said slowly, in something greater than fire and shadow. That night, she wrote in her journal, if my crown is worn over eyes that refuse to see truth, then it is a crown of blindness. One morning, as she looked out from the sandstone ramparts where hawks circled, she turned to Zara and whispered, perhaps there is more to sovereignty than splendor. Zara studied her queen with curious affection. You are changing, or awakening, Queen Balqees answered. And so the decision came not suddenly, but like the last grain in an hourglass falling into place. She would meet Suleiman, but not in subjugation, nor in defiance. As a seeker, she summoned the council again. This prophet king has called upon us not with demand, but with a challenge. The room erupted in debate. Majesty, you cannot travel so far unguarded. I will take warriors, but not as aggressors. Let him come to you. No, pride blinds. I will go. And so, Sheba stirred. Caravans were prepared. She wanted to know if this man was truth or illusion, a prophet or a magician, and in her heart, though she would not speak it aloud, she wanted to see if this God, this unseen, unshaped, infinite God was truly real. Before she left, she spent one final evening at the Temple of the Sun. She stood before the golden altar and looked at the impassive. "Why are you silent?" she whispered. "Have I been worshipping only fire and shadow?" The sun god did not answer, but the wind outside rustled the temple curtains, a soft, unseen whisper, a direction. The Queen of Sheba left at dawn. The kingdom of the prophet, the desert wind that had whispered through Sheba's temples, carried a different voice in Jerusalem. Here, it swept through cedar groves and olive trees, stirring the banners of a kingdom unlike any other, a kingdom in which man, beast, jinn, and wind obeyed a single sovereign, Suleiman son of Dawud, prophet of the Almighty. His court watched in reverence, not out of obligation, but devotion. To see the prophet king commune with the unseen was to witness a crack between heaven and earth. On a high plateau where the temple of Jerusalem gleamed in white limestone and gilded cedar, Suleiman stood silently, his hands raised in prayer. Suleiman's prayer ended not with chant or gesture, but a stillness so complete that even the birds above quieted. He turned. Has the hoopoe returned? A golden feathered bird with a crest like a diadem darted from the eastern sky and landed near the prophet's shoulder. "I have found her," the hoopoe said, his voice clear in the language only prophets and the spiritually attuned could hear. "The Queen of Sheba prepares a caravan. She brings treasure, but more than that. She brings questions." The court mobilized, not in defense or intimidation, but in hospitality, revelation, and grandeur meant to reflect not Suleiman's pride, but the majesty of the Creator. "Shall I go to her and bring her here at once?" "Master, but let us prepare." Suleiman smiled. "She has chosen inquiry over arrogance." From Suleiman, servant to the one God, to Balqees, Queen of Sheba, "Come not with arrogance, but in humility, and you shall find truth greater than gold. I do not seek your submission to me, but your awakening to the one who fashioned all hearts. Peace be upon those who follow guidance. This is the mark of one whom God guides." The jinn Ifron, clothed in heatless flame, stepped forward. No, she must arrive by her own will. The command echoed beyond the physical. With a mere thought, Suleiman summoned his advisors, both human and jinn. In his chambers, Suleiman sat with his trusted scribe Azrael. "Write a letter, but not of warning, of invitation." Pools were filled with water from distant springs, and strange trees from lands east of Eden were brought in, their fruit gleaming with unknown colors. Azrael dipped his reed into ink and began, "In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful." The letter was rolled, sealed with the royal stamp, and bound with a ribbon dyed in sky blue. Suleiman gave it back to the hoop. Wisdom is not born of knowing, but of seeking. She had come not as a monarch, but as a student. "Deliver this. Guard it with your wings and your life." Musicians played gentle flutes, and petals rained from the heights of the temple. The hoopoe bowed and vanished into the sky like an arrow of light. Meanwhile, in the palace of Jerusalem, preparations intensified. Massive pavilions were erected beside the gardens, shaded by silks woven from threads finer than among the court opinions varied. "She is a queen who worships the sun," murmured Elian, a court elder. "What can such a woman understand of Tawheed?" 60 camels adorned in crimson and silver bore chests filled with incense, frankincense, sapphire, myrrh, and carved onyx. Towering elephants marched beside them, each bearing golden howdahs. Warriors of Sheba, their armor inlaid with turquoise, rode with discipline but not aggression. And at the center of the procession, under a canopy woven with night blue silk and silver stars, rode Balqees. "She is a woman who questions," countered another, "and questioning is a door to belief." Suleiman overheard this and nodded. He turned his gaze toward the south. "She is coming." 3 weeks later, the horizon darkened, not with storm, but with dust kicked up by camels and horses of Balqees' grand procession. From the battlements of Jerusalem, Sentries watched in awe. It was unlike any caravan they had seen. Her presence was magnetic. She wore no crown that day, only a head covering of indigo and pearls. Suleiman's court gathered to witness her arrival. The gates of Jerusalem opened, not with fanfare, but with reverence. Balqees dismounted without help and approached Suleiman, who stood at the top of a long stairway carved from purest alabaster. Their eyes met. It was not a meeting of royalty, but a meeting of seekers. Balqees bowed her head. "I have come not with pride, but with questions." Suleiman smiled. "Then you are welcome in the court of truth." He extended his hand not to grasp, but to guide. What followed in the days ahead would test reason, faith, pride, and perception. Balqees witnessed animals and men eat together in peace. She saw jinn bow in prayer beside humans. She was shown a tree that bore 12 different fruits in a single season. But none of this moved her as much as the prophet's words. Each evening, Suleiman sat with her under the shade of the temple garden and answered her questions not with cleverness, but with clarity. Who is this God who needs no image? One who cannot be shaped because he shapes all. If he cannot be seen, how can we believe? Do you see the wind, the love in a mother's heart? Yet you believe they exist. Balqees grew quiet. "Why then do we make statues in temples? Because we feared emptiness," Suleiman said. "But true worship fills the unseen space with presence." On the third evening, he recited verses revealed to him in divine clarity. Balqees listened not with her ears alone, but with her soul. Something within her shifted. She rose and stood before him. "All my life I worshipped a son that could not hear, could not answer. Today, I see the light behind all lights." Suleiman nodded. "Then your throne has moved closer to truth." Balqees fell to her knees not in submission to a king, but in gratitude to the Almighty. "I bear witness," she said, voice trembling, "that there is no God but God alone." The court murmured in awe. Jinn and men alike bowed in unison. Suleiman raised his hands. "Then you have found what you came seeking, and more." She stood in the private garden chamber prepared for her, wrapped in a robe of desert linen, staring into the darkness and the strange new horizon of her own belief. And thus, the Queen of Sheba became more than a monarch, she became a believer. The woman's face held awe and fear in equal measure. Night fell over Jerusalem like a velvet curtain embroidered with stars. But sleep did not come easily to Balqees. Or shall I call you something else now? Her life had been shaped by sun and throne, ritual and power. Now, that very foundation felt undone not by force, but by light. The prophet Suleiman had shown her not just wisdom, but a path beyond power. Her throne was a symbol not just of her reign, but her identity, solid, ancient, carved with the lore of Sheba. The moonlight filtered through colored glass, bathing the floor in Sephiric patterns. Jinn and men stood together, awaiting his word. How could it be moved, and why? A quiet knock stirred her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called softly. "She has. I have asked her to believe, by reason. She has. Now I shall show her that the power of God transcends even the imaginations of monarchs." It was her most trusted handmaid I, Ifrit, shall bring it to you before you rise from your seat. My Queen Balqees smiled gently. "Call me sister in search." "What is it?" "There is movement in the lower court. The prophet has summoned his ministers. It concerns your throne." Balqees' heart thudded. "My throne? Then let it be so." Zoraina nodded. "Yes, my lady, he wishes to bring it." Balqees was silent for a moment, digesting the enormity of the idea. "When she enters, we shall see if she recognizes it." In the grand hall of Jerusalem, Suleiman gathered his court. "I have asked her to come freely." He turned to the jinn assembled, and then it was there, solid, golden, etched in the star pattern, its legs shaped like roaring lions, its armrests glimmering with sapphires and emerald. "Which of you can bring me her throne before she arrives at dawn?" It was real. It was hers. But its arrival here defied all her worldly understanding. A massive jinn with eyes of volcanic glass stepped forward. But before Suleiman could speak, another voice rose, clearer, calmer. "I will bring it to you in the blink of an eye, if it be by God's will." It was Asif ibn Bashir, the human vizier, a man granted knowledge of the greatest name of God. Suleiman nodded. In less than the time it took to draw a breath, the marble tiles before the prophet shimmered. The court gasped in unison. But Suleiman raised his hand. "Cover it, alter it slightly." Balqees was summoned at dawn. The skies above Jerusalem flamed with the colors of awakening. She entered the main hall, unsure of what to expect. Suleiman greeted her warmly, his eyes filled with light, but a curious glint played at the corner of his mouth. "Tell me, my sister in search, is this your throne?" Balqees looked at the covered seat before her. The carvings were subtly different. The jewels seemed rearranged. "It resembles it," she said carefully. "It might be mine." Suleiman nodded. "And yet it is." Balqees stared. "How?" "By the will of God, who moves what no man or woman can. He who brings mountains low and lifts hearts high." Balqees stepped forward and placed her hand upon the throne. She dropped to her knees again, trembling. "Your God does not ask for faith without signs." "No," Suleiman said, "but neither does he depend on them. Signs are for those whose hearts are opening." The days that followed were filled with deeper dialogue. No longer merely a guest, Balqees took her place among the wise, sometimes advising, sometimes learning. She met with the mothers of Jerusalem, the merchants of the temple market, the poets, the orphans. She wept when she saw how justice was not reserved for the rich. She laughed when a child asked her if she used to believe the sun had ears. She prayed beside Suleiman under the canopy of stars, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt and freer. Eventually, the time came to speak of her return. "You must go," Suleiman said. "Your people await, not just a queen, but a guide." "I am no prophet," she replied. "No, but you are one who listens." She nodded. "Then, let me take not just your words, but your ways." Suleiman gifted her a scroll as written wisdom and a ring bearing the seal of Tawheed. The Tales had traveled faster than a caravan, that she had bowed before another king, that her throne had vanished and reappeared by divine command, that she no longer worshipped the sun but one unseen. Balqees departed with her caravan, smaller now in gold, but richer in spirit. And behind her, Jerusalem watched not a queen depart, but a legacy begin. The caravan moved like a long serpent of silk and sand through the desert, leaving the fertile valleys of Jerusalem behind, and returning to the arid plains of Sava. Balqees sat upon her camel, the sun reflecting off her modest crown, no longer made for dominion, but now a reminder of service. Her people awaited her return with curiosity and confusion. As Sheba's white stone city emerged on the horizon, Balqees' heart beat with an unfamiliar rhythm: hope, anxiety, duty. She had left as a queen and returned as a believer. Zoraina rode beside her, veiled against the wind. Balqees stood where she had once sat, her throne untouched since her departure. "Will they listen?" she asked. "My journey to Jerusalem was not a display of wealth, but a search for truth. I have found it not in gold or dominion, but in the worship of the one God, whose power moved my throne and opened my heart." "They listened before," Balqees said, "but to rule. Now I ask them to follow a path. The moon does not answer. Only the Creator hears every prayer. And if they don't," Balqees looked ahead, "then I will walk it alone." At the city gates, the high priests waited in ornate robes, their faces strained with uncertainty. The chief priest Heraman stepped forward. "Welcome, Queen of Sheba. Your court awaits you." "I have returned with wisdom greater than rubies," she replied. "Let the court assemble." The palace hall, once a symbol of grandeur, now felt like a test of truth. They were carved in stone. "It is God who gave us wind and water and the breath to speak, and he sent me to you." Changed, she turned to her council. Gasps rose from the court. Heraman narrowed his eyes. "You abandon our gods." "I abandon falsehood," Balqees replied. "The sun does not hear us." The room fell into silence. One voice spoke her mother's. "I knew when you were born under a sky of no stars, you would tear away veils others feared to touch." Balqees turned, surprised. Her mother, once silent in courtly matters, stepped forward and placed her hand on her daughter's. "I will walk your path." Others followed, her general, her chief advisor, her steward. One by one, they stepped forward. But Heraman remained. "You insult the gods that built this kingdom. They did not build it." He bowed his head. "Then may I see this God in time." Queen Balqees ordered the temples turned into places of study and prayer. The idols were removed not by fire or fury, but respectfully, as symbols of a past now outgrown. She read Suleiman's scroll aloud each evening to gathered crowds words of justice, of mercy, of unity. She walked among the sick, the elderly, the orphaned. She washed their feet and fed them with her own hands. The people who had once feared her as divine now loved her as one of them. When asked why, She would say, "I have given my heart to truth." What man can compete with that? Years passed. Sheba grew into a new light, not just a land of trade and perfume, but a land where knowledge and justice flowed like the great rivers of the north. Queen Balqees never married. She wrote letters to Suleiman, though she never returned to Jerusalem. In one letter, she wrote, "You showed me a mirror, and in it I saw not my face, but my soul. I now live so others may see theirs." When she died, they buried her with no idol, no gold, just the scroll and the ring of Torhi. And in his reply, trade routes still bustled, artisans still crafted incense and gold, and the sweet scent of frankincense still perfumed the air. But the soul of the kingdom had turned. Where once festivals were held to honor the sun and moon, now gatherings took place to discuss mercy, law, and justice. The scroll of Suleiman became a living document, not a relic, recited in temple stone to schools and carved into the hearts of young scribes. The seal the ring Suleiman had given her, marked with the divine name, was a source of awe and mystery. She wore it on her right hand only during moments of prayer or judgment, and none but Zerena had ever touched it. The seal carried no magic, yet it felt like a symbol of balance, earthly rule humbled by heavenly awareness. You have become more than queen, you have become a witness. Queen Balqees ruled for many more years, her hair turning silver like desert moonlight. A monument was raised not to her power, but to her transformation. And the people of Sheba never forgot the queen who bowed only to truth. In the years after Queen Balqees's return to Sheba, the kingdom transformed quietly, but unmistakably. Her final days were spent in the gardens she had planted herself, groves of pomegranate, olive, and fig. There she prayed under the stars, the very ones she once believed to be divine. The scroll was written in 3 languages, Hebrew-Sabaean, and an ancient script known only to a handful of sages. Let it pass only to those who seek to lead by kneeling first. Each line revealed principles that transcended time: justice balanced by mercy, truth anchored by humility, power tempered by compassion. Queen Balqees herself read it nightly in her court, until the words settled into the bones of her people like rain into thirsty soil. But it was not only the scroll that lived on. One day, near the dusk of her life, Queen Balqees summoned her council to speak, not as a queen, but as a mother of a new legacy. "My time is passing. The throne is not mine to keep, but what I have learned must not be buried with me." She handed the scroll to a young woman named Merib, a student of great wisdom and tender heart. "You will guard this, read it until the ink fades, then rewrite it in your own hand." Then she took off the seal. The chest was placed beside her, but never opened again, for they had all memorized what was inside. This is not for a monarch, it is for a servant of truth. Let no one wear it who seeks dominion. The court watched in reverent silence as Queen Balqees placed both objects in a chest of cedarwood and closed it gently. As the years grew heavier, Queen Balqees withdrew more often into solitude. When the hour of her death approached, Zerena came to her side. "My queen," she whispered, tears brimming, "you changed the world." Queen Balqees smiled, her silver hair falling across her shoulders like moonlight. "No, I only opened a door. Let them walk through it." She passed with no cry, only breath surrendering to silence. And that night, the stars shone brighter over Shebaz, if bowing to the queen who had once bowed to the truth. Her burial was attended not only by nobles, but farmers, mothers, scholars, travelers. From Jerusalem, Suleiman received word of her passing. He closed his court for 3 days in mourning. "She has returned," he said to his scribes, "not to the earth, but to the light." And in Sheba, beneath the whispering palms, the children recited. Long after Queen Balqees's passing, the desert winds carried stories of her transformation far beyond the borders of Sheba. Traders and travelers spoke not only of her wealth and power, but of a queen who dared to seek truth beyond tradition and throne. Her voice, steady and filled with conviction, awakened hearts that had grown cold to the old ways. Through her, the wisdom of the winds whispered a message of hope, that true power lies not in dominion, but in service. Her scroll became a treasured manuscript, copied and translated in distant lands, inspiring scholars and seekers alike. Merib, the young guardian of the scroll, traveled from village to village, sharing Queen Balqees's lessons of justice and mercy. Meanwhile, in the distant courts of Jerusalem, Suleiman's own wisdom deepened as he reflected on the legacy of the queen who had walked beside him. He penned new treatises on leadership, weaving together the threads of faith, humility, and compassion that Queen Balqees embodied. In time, the two kingdoms, once separated by distance and difference, became linked not just by trade but by a shared vision of righteousness. Yet the road was not without challenge. Some in Sheba clung to old idols, fearing that change meant loss. Others questioned the young scribes who recited unfamiliar verses. Messages traveled swiftly between Sheba and Jerusalem, bearing gifts of knowledge, art, and spiritual insight. The two kingdoms, once distant, were bound now by a covenant of light. The air was thick with the scent of frankincense and new beginnings. Some elders feared that abandoning the old ways would unravel the kingdom's strength. Words clashed like swords, but she spoke with the calm strength of one who had inherited a queen's vision. Slowly, the fire of resistance cooled, replaced by a flicker of understanding. Determined to protect the legacy, Merib set out on a journey across rugged terrain, her resolve steeled by the memory of Queen Balqees's courage. The kingdom breathed easier, the winds whispering of a future where faith and reason walked hand in hand. Secret gatherings whispered of rebellion, their voices carried on the desert wind like shadows at dusk. And mercy, the humility that tempers power, the unity that binds diverse peoples. She knew the path ahead would test more than her courage. It would test the faith of a kingdom striving to be born anew. Children gathered in courtyards, their voices raised in as elders shared stories of the queen who had bowed to the one unseen. But as the years passed, the teachings took root like seeds scattered on fertile ground, growing into a forest of understanding. And the winds carried their leaves across deserts and mountains, reminding all who listened, the greatest kingdom is one built on truth. The sun rose over the ancient lands of Sheba, casting long shadows across the marble columns of the former temples, now transformed into halls of learning. Merib stood before the gathered scholars and scribes, her hand resting on the sacred scroll that had guided generations. "We are the caretakers," she said, "not just of words, but of the covenant promise to uphold justice, mercy, and humility in all we do." Far away in Jerusalem, King Suleiman sat, surrounded by his council, contemplating the delicate threads that connected their worlds. But not all welcomed this new dawn. In Sheba, dissent simmered beneath the surface. Amidst the growing tension, Merib received a troubling message. A group of dissenters had stolen a portion of the scroll, intending to destroy it and revive the idols. As the caravan wound through the mountains, Merib reflected on the lessons etched into the scroll, the balance of justice. At the heart of the desert, where the sands stretched like an endless sea, Merib confronted the dissent. Returning with the scroll intact, Merib was welcomed as a guardian of light, a living testament to the covenant forged by Queen Balqees and Suleiman. And as the stars illuminate the night sky, the people of Sheba and Jerusalem looked upward, reminded that even the darkest nights are pierced by light. The years had woven themselves into a tapestry of peace and progress between Sheba and Jerusalem, yet beneath the shimmering surface, ancient shadows stirred. One crisp morning, in the grand library of Sheba, a young historian named Tariq discovered a hidden scroll buried among forgotten archives. Its brittle edges whispered secrets of a time before Queen Balqees' reign, warning etched in archaic script about the fragile balance between power and pride. Tariq's fingers trembled as he unrolled the parchment, revealing a prophecy that spoke of a day when kingdoms might fall, if they forgot the humility that once saved them. The message was clear. History was not a chain of unbroken triumphs, but a cycle demanding vigilance. At the same time, in Jerusalem, a rival faction stirred. Jealous of Suleiman's wisdom and the blossoming alliance with Sheba, they plotted to disrupt the fragile harmony. She carried not only the scroll and seal but the hopes of two nations intertwined by faith and purpose. Rumors of dissent reached the ears of the king, who called upon Merib to travel to Jerusalem and lend her voice to counsel and reconciliation. As Merib journeyed through the desert, the weight of legacy pressed upon her. Her arrival was met with both reverence and suspicion. The court's atmosphere was thick with intrigue. Allies whispered, opponents schemed. The scroll and seal rested in a simple wooden chest beside her, a symbol not of power, but of service. In this web of politics, Merib's resolve became a beacon, reminding all that the covenant was forged in light, not shadow. The true kingdom is one where justice flows like rivers, and mercy reigns upon the earth. The old idols lay forgotten, replaced by faith in one who listens to every prayer, seen only by the soul. But the echoes of the past lingered, warning that peace was never permanent without vigilance and wisdom. Generations had passed since the days of Queen Balqees and King Sulaiman, but their legacy remained etched not only in stone and scrolls. May the light that began with a humble queen and a just king illuminates the darkest paths, guiding all who seek truth, but in the hearts of all who walk the path of truth and justice. Together with Suleiman, she navigated the labyrinth of palace plots, forging new paths of trust. In the nights that followed, Mariv stood upon the city walls, gazing at the stars, silent witnesses to history's unfolding. She whispered a prayer: "May we always remember the lessons of those who bowed first, that we might stand together." The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting golden hues across the lands of Sheba and Jerusalem. Mirib, now a wise elder, gathered the people beneath the ancient palms where Queen Balqees had once prayed. "Remember," Mirib spoke softly, "that the true throne is the heart that bends in humility." Around her, faces bright with hope and understanding reflected the dawn of a new era. In Jerusalem, King Suleiman watched the stars from his chamber, feeling the gentle weight of time. He penned a final letter, destined for Sheba, to the heirs of wisdom: "May your journey never cease." As night fell, the winds carried that message across deserts and seas, through mountains and valleys, whispering the eternal truth. The greatest power is love, the highest honor is service, and the longest legacy is a life lived in truth. And so, the story of Queen Balqees and Suleiman became legend, not of crowns or conquest, but of hearts transformed, kingdoms united, and a light that endures beyond time.